The old man's hand trembles as he holds up a faded photograph from his battered wallet. His eyes lock with the judges across the silent courtroom. For a moment, neither of them breathes. The judge's stern expression falters, confusion and recognition flooding his eyes as he stares at the small photo. He leans forward, heart pounding, the gavel slipping slowly from his grip. Something about that photograph has struck him to the core. The air is thick with tension and unspoken revelation, and the entire room waits, frozen, to see what will happen next. Walter's day ends as it always does, with a quiet sigh in the dim light of his little shop. The streets outside have emptied. The only sounds are the faint ticking of an old clock and the shuffle of the elderly shoemaker's worn boots on the floor. He flips the sign to "Closed," his gnarled hands lingering for a moment on the door's edge. Another long day of resoling shoes and patching up leather for a few meager coins is over. Inside, the air smells of shoe polish and leather. Walter sits back down at his workbench, rubbing his tired eyes. A single yellowed lamp casts a halo around him, illuminating dust motes that dance in the stillness. On the bench lies a small stack of unpaid bills and a prescription for his wife's medication. He runs a hand through his thinning gray hair, worry creasing his brow. Business has been slow for years now, and every penny he earns stretches thinner than the souls he mends. Yet, despite his troubles, Walter's heart remains kind. Earlier that afternoon, a little boy from the neighborhood came in with sneakers torn at the seams. He had no money, only big, pleading eyes. Walter fixed them without a second thought, waving away the boy's mumbled promise to pay later. It wasn't the first time. Walter had always quietly helped those who couldn't afford to pay. It was simply who he was. Now, alone in the silence, Walter reaches into his pocket and pulls out his wallet. Tucked carefully inside is a creased old photograph. In it, a much younger Walter smiles beside a boy holding a freshly repaired pair of shoes. The child in the photo beams with gratitude, missing front tooth and all. Walter gazes at this photograph, his eyes soft. That moment captured years ago is one of his most treasured memories, a reminder that his work, his life, has meant something to someone. It gives him strength on the hard days. He slips the photo back into his wallet and stands up slowly. He still has one more stop to make. A short while later, Walter pushes open the door of a small pharmacy 2 blocks away. Fluorescent lights hum overhead as he approaches the counter. The pharmacist recognizes him and offers a polite but tired smile. Walter gently places the prescription note on the counter and clears his throat. His voice is soft, humble as he speaks. "It's for my wife. She's not well. I'll have the money soon, I promise. Could you possibly let me take the medicine now and pay you at the end of the month?" he asks, his tone almost pleading. The pharmacist's smile fades. He has heard this request before. With a sympathetic shrug, he shakes his head. "I'm sorry, Walter, I really am, but I can't. Business hasn't been great for me either, and the supplier needs cash up front. I can't give out medicine on credit." Walter's shoulders slump. He nods in understanding, fighting the despair creeping into his eyes. He thanks the pharmacist for his time and turns to leave, empty-handed and heavy-hearted. As he shuffles toward the door, he passes a well-dressed customer entering the store. The man gives Walter a brief, dismissive glance. Embarrassed, Walter bows his head and exits into the cool night air. Outside, a light drizzle has begun, dotting the pavement. Walter pulls his threadbare coat tighter around himself. He feels the weight of the world on his shoulders. A sick wife at home, empty pockets, and now another door closed in his face. But he steels himself. He will find a way. He always has. Suddenly, a sharp voice calls out from behind him. "Hey, stop right there!" Walter turns, startled, to see the well-dressed man from the pharmacy doorway rushing toward him, an accusatory finger pointed. Behind him, the pharmacist stands in the rain, looking concerned. "Where is it?" the man snaps angrily. "What did you take?" Walter's eyes widen in confusion. I didn't take anything," he stammers. The man claims that a pricey vial of medicine is missing from the shelf, one that was right by Walter when he was at the counter. He must have taken it when the pharmacist wasn't looking. Walter's heart skips. He had noticed that very medicine on the counter, yes, but he never touched it. It was the treatment his wife needed, far too expensive for him, yet the thought of stealing it had never even crossed his mind. He pleads his innocence, voice trembling with emotion, pleading, "I swear I didn't take anything. I would never, please, check my pockets, I have nothing." He turns them inside out to show only a few coins and old receipts. But the well-dressed customer doesn't believe a word. He grabs Walter's arm with unnecessary force. "Men like you," he spits out, "lying and stealing because you think you can get away with it. I saw you eyeing that medicine." Walter winces at the man's harsh grip and harsher words. The pharmacist hovers in the doorway, uncertain, but the customer has already pulled out his phone to call the police. Minutes later, red and blue lights flash across the wet street. Walter stands hunched and shivering as two officers question the furious customer and the hesitant pharmacist. The customer insists he saw Walter pocket the vial, though in truth he only saw Walter looking at it. The pharmacist admits the medicine is indeed missing. Walter's protests of innocence falter in the face of their suspicious glares. One officer searches Walter's coat thoroughly. Of course, he finds nothing. But the customer is adamant that the old man must have hidden it somewhere. Finally, the police decide to take Walter to the station to sort things out. An officer cuffs his wrists gently, almost apologetically. Walter's eyes fill with helpless tears in the rain. He thinks of his wife, Margaret, alone and waiting for medicine that he isn't bringing home. He can only hope a kind neighbor will check in on her tonight. The squad car door closes on Walter, its cold metal and caging separating him from the dark, drizzling freedom outside. That night, Walter sits quietly in a holding cell, the events a blur of humiliation and grief. He doesn't understand how his life came to this point. All he ever wanted was to be honest and kind, and yet here he is, treated like a criminal. He fishes out his wallet with trembling hands and finds the old photo inside. Hidden from the guard's eyes, he gazes at that boyish grin in the picture under the faint glow of a security light. A single tear rolls down Walter's cheek as he presses the photo to his heart. "I never hurt anyone," he whispers to himself. Alone and unjustly accused, Walter wonders if anyone will believe his truth. If you were a witness to this, would you stand up for him or trust the accusations? By morning, formal charges are filed. Walter is to be arraigned in court. The missing vial hasn't turned up, and the police, lacking any other suspect, have written their report naming the kindly shoemaker as the thief. It feels surreal. Exhausted and heartbroken, Walter is led from the cell into the courthouse, shackles around his wrists. Every step feels heavy. People in the hallway pause to stare at him. A frail old man escorted like a dangerous criminal. He lowers his head in shame. When he's brought into the courtroom, Walter swallows hard, trying to calm the quiver in his chest. This is a small hearing room, yet it feels immense and daunting to him. At the front, a stern-looking judge shuffles some papers without glancing up. The name plaque on the bench reads Judge Robert Lawrence, but Walter is too nervous to notice any familiarity in the name. He's directed to stand behind the defendant's table. As he lifts his gaze to the bench, the judge finally looks at him. Their eyes meet for a brief instant. The judge's eyes are cool and piercing, showing no sign of recognition. Just the usual hardened fatigue Walter has seen in many people's eyes when they look at him these days. To Judge Lawrence, this is just another petty criminal standing before him. Nearby, the well-dressed accuser sits in the first row, arms crossed and lips pressed thin in satisfaction. In the quiet, Walter can hear the wall clock tick. His heart thunders louder. He clasps his hands together to stop them shaking. The proceeding begins. The young prosecutor reads out the theft charge formally. Walter feels faint hearing the words theft and felony tied to his name. He opens his mouth to protest, but his assigned public defender pats his arm gently. whispering for him to stay calm. Walter's plea is entered, not guilty. He speaks the words in a trembling voice, insisting on his innocence. But his voice is barely audible in the silent room. The judge has to ask him to repeat himself, which he does, louder but cracking. "Not guilty, Your Honor. I didn't steal anything." Judge Lawrence finally addresses Walter directly. His tone is crisp, authority tempered with impatience. "Sir, you stand accused of a very serious crime. The evidence as presented is not in your favor." He glances at the report. "A witness claims he saw you take the item, and the item is indeed missing. Do you have anything you wish to say in your defense?" Walter's mouth goes dry. Everyone is watching him, the judge, the lawyers, the accuser with a smug glare, even the few curious onlookers. He feels small, utterly alone. Still, he must speak. His voice quivers as he steps forward slightly. "Your Honor, I understand how it looks, but I didn't take anything. I went to the pharmacy only to ask for my wife's medicine. When they told me I couldn't buy it on credit, I left. That's all. I have no reason to steal. I've tried to live an honest life." Judge Lawrence narrows his eyes and leans forward slightly. His face remains stern. "An honest life, you say?" he repeats, a hint of skepticism in his voice. He peers at Walter's threadbare coat and work-worn hands. To his eyes, he sees a struggling, desperate man, and desperation, he knows, can lead to poor choices. Firmly, need does not justify theft in the eyes of the law, the judge declares, his voice resonating in the courtroom. "Many people face hardships. It is no excuse to take what isn't yours." Tears of frustration well up in Walter's eyes. "I know that, Your Honor. I would never break the law. I was a soldier. He stops himself, voice choking. "I've always tried to do what's right." His vision blurs as he sees the judge's unsympathetic stare. In that stare, he feels every judgment society has ever laid upon him for being old, poor, and now presumed guilty. Judge Lawrence's jaw tightens. Something about Walter's trembling figure tugs at a memory buried deep inside, but he pushes it aside. He has a duty to remain impartial and firm. "The facts are the facts," he states, though there's a slight unease in his voice now. "The medicine didn't vanish on its own, and our witness," he nods toward the well-dressed man, "claims he saw you do it." The man juts out his chin proudly at the mention. A flash of hurt crosses Walter's face. He turns to the accuser, not with anger but pleading. "You're wrong," Walter says softly, shaking his head, pleading. "Please. I was desperate, yes, but I wouldn't steal. I was holding my prescription, not anything else." The accuser just rolls his eyes. The judge takes a deep breath, frustration creeping into his voice. "Mr. Hayes," he addresses Walter by his last name, "the court can't simply take your word. Do you have any evidence, any testimony to refute what's been said?" Evidence. Walter's mind races. What can he offer? He has no camera footage, no ally who saw the truth, only his honesty, which no one here seems to credit. The officers searched me and found nothing, sir," Walter says, desperation in his tone. "If I had stolen it, wouldn't I have it on me? They can search my home, my shop. They won't find anything because I never had it." Voice rises, cracking on the edge of a sob. The judge drums his fingers on the bench, considering. It's true the police found nothing. Yet, stranger things have happened. The medicine could be hidden elsewhere. He is about to speak when the accuser interjects hotly. "He probably threw it to an accomplice when he walked out. People like him have tricks, Your Honor." Walter's shoulders sag. The prosecutor quickly reminds the accuser to speak only when asked, and the judge silences the interruption with a raised hand. But the damage is done. The seed of doubt is firmly planted in the judge's mind. His gaze hardens again. "Mr. Hayes, need I remind you," Judge Lawrence says sternly, "that lying under oath is a crime in itself. If you did take it and are afraid to admit it, now is the time to speak the truth and perhaps earn the court's leniency." Eyes widen. Walter's eyes widen in hurt. "I am telling the truth," he nearly whispers. voice faint, as silence falls. Judge Lawrence's face shows a flicker of disappointment. He leans back, regarding Walter severely. "I have heard many pleas in this courtroom, many claims of innocence," he says, voice low but clear. "Often the truly guilty swear up and down they've done nothing wrong. It pains me to say, but seldom do I see real accountability." His words hang in the air like a sentence themselves. Walter feels the room closing in. In the quiet, he notices the judge's expression, that stern look of someone who expects to be lied to. It breaks something in Walter to be seen that way. In a surge of anguish, Walter reaches into his coat. For a split second, a bailiff steps forward, alarmed. But Walter is only pulling out his battered old wallet. With shaking fingers, he fumbles it open on the table. Coins clink onto the wood, a couple of quarters rolling away. "Please, I have nothing to hide," Walter says, voice quavering. He empties the wallet's contents desperately. A few small bills, a crumpled bus ticket, a tiny bronze key, and unintentionally, the cherished photograph which slips out and flutters gently to the floor at his feet. Walter doesn't notice the photo fall, but Judge Lawrence does. From his bench, he sees the glimpse of an image. The colors of a decades-old photograph, sliding out and coming to rest on the polished courtroom floor. Something about it catches his eye, a sense of familiarity pricking at his subconscious.
"Officer, pick that up, please," the judge says, motioning to the bailiff. The bailiff retrieves the fallen photo and holds it uncertainly. Walter, realizing what dropped, reaches out. "Oh, that's just," he begins, but the bailiff has already handed the photo up to the judge. Judge Lawrence takes the photograph and adjusts his glasses. Long pause. The moment his eyes focus on the image, the world seems to stop turning. In the photo, a much younger Walter beams kindly, and beside him stands a boy of about 10, thin and bright-eyed, showing off a pair of neatly repaired shoes. The boy's face, though youthful and smudged with a bit of dirt, is instantly recognizable to the judge, because he is looking at himself. A thunderbolt of memory strikes Judge Lawrence. His grip on the photo tightens, his knuckles blanching. He feels the air rush from his lungs as years peel away from his mind. Suddenly, he is that barefoot, impoverished child again, a boy who once had only one torn pair of shoes and whose widowed mother could barely afford bread, let alone new shoes. A boy who walked into a cobbler's shop one day, ashamed of his falling-apart sneakers, and met a kind old shoemaker named Walter. Judge Lawrence's stoic mask crumbles. In his mind's eye, he sees it all so clearly. Young Robbie Lawrence, feet blistered and shoes full of holes, standing in that very shop we saw earlier. And Walter, younger, stronger, smiling gently as he kneels to repair the boy's shoes with care and not a cent charged for it. He even polished them up and gave the boy a piece of candy before sending him on his way. The courtroom is silent as the grave, all eyes on the judge who has gone quiet, staring at the photograph. Walter looks on, puzzled by the judge's sudden change in demeanor. He doesn't yet realize what is happening, but he sees the man's stern visage melt into something like awe and deep, personal emotion. Judge Lawrence slowly rises from his seat, still fixated on the photo. "This photo?" he murmurs. His voice catches and he clears his throat, struggling to maintain his composure. Where did you get this?" he asks softly, his eyes now finding Walter's. But those eyes are no longer cold and judgmental. They are wide, shimmering as if holding back tears. Walter stares bewildered. It's mine, Your Honor," he replies gently. "It's from years ago." His voice is cautious, unsure why the judge is reacting this way. "That boy in the picture, I mended his shoes a long time past. He was a sweet kid, came by my shop often." Judge Lawrence steps down from the bench now, descending the 3 wooden steps slowly, never taking his eyes off Walter. The bailiff instinctively moves as if to intervene. Judges don't usually leave the bench in the middle of a hearing, but something about the judge's face stops him. It's not anger anymore, it's vulnerability.
"I know this boy,"
the judge says, voice trembling despite a faint, astonished smile pulling at his lips. Or rather, I knew him. He swallows a lump in his throat. Because that boy was me. A collective gasp echoes through the small courtroom. The prosecutor's jaw drops. The well-dressed accuser's confident smirk vanishes, replaced by confusion. Walter's eyes widen as he looks closer at the judge, truly looks at him. And in a heartbeat, he sees it. The shape of the eyes, that familiar curve of a cheek. Recognition crashes over him. Robbie? Walter breathes, barely audible. His voice breaks on the nickname he used for that little boy all those years ago. Judge Robert Lawrence lets out a soft, shaky laugh that is half a sob. I haven't heard that name in a long time, he says. His composure is gone. He's blinking back tears openly now. Mr. Hayes, Walter, I didn't recognize you. It's been so long. Walter's cane falls from where it leaned against the table as he steps forward. He hardly notices he's moving. In that moment, he's not thinking of judges or thieves or courts. He just sees the little boy whose picture he kept for decades standing before him as a grown man. It really is you, Walter whispers, a tear spilling onto his cheek. The little Robbie who used to come by for shoe patches. Look at you now. His voice is thick with pride and astonishment. The judge nods, unable to speak for a moment. Memories glimmer in his mind like the reflection of that warm lamp in Walter's old shop. He remembers the gentle hands fixing his soul, the way Walter never once made him feel lesser for having torn shoes, how Walter always sent him off with a smile, and a secretly slipped candy or two. The courtroom around them fades. It's as if they are the only two people in the world. Stories like this are rare and beautiful, reminding us that empathy and generosity can ripple through time in unexpected ways. If you believe in the power of compassion and second chances, join us and never miss a tale that warms the heart. Judge Lawrence clears his throat, trying to gather himself. He looks at the photo once more, then gently returns it to Walter's trembling hands. All these years, you kept this, he says, his voice filled with gratitude and disbelief. Walter nods, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. It was one of my proudest moments, seeing you smile like that. I often wondered what became of you. A fragile smile blooms on his face. You've grown into a fine man, I see. The judge takes a deep, shuddering breath and straightens up, turning now to face the courtroom. His judicial robes still hang on his shoulders, but now there's a gentleness in the way he holds himself that wasn't there before. I owe this man more than I can ever say, Judge Lawrence announces, voice ringing with conviction as he gestures toward Walter. When I was a child with nothing, Mr. Hayes showed me kindness and generosity without asking for anything in return. He saved me from despair on many cold, hungry days, and he might very well have kept me on the straight path just by being the compassionate soul he is. He pauses, looking directly at the well-dressed accuser and the others who had judged Walter so harshly. It appears I was prepared to condemn a good man before truly understanding him. We all were. The accuser flushes red and drops his gaze, shame creeping up his neck. The prosecutor seems at a loss for words. Judge Lawrence continues, now with authority returning to his tone but tempered by warmth. The court finds that there is insufficient evidence to proceed with this case. The charges against Walter Hayes are hereby dismissed. He nods firmly to the clerk, who hurriedly records the decision. A collective exhale releases in the room. Walter closes his eyes, tears of relief and joy slipping down his face. He's free. The nightmare of being labeled a thief is over in an instant. But Judge Lawrence isn't finished. He steps closer to Walter, then does something that sends a ripple of astonishment through everyone present. He reaches out and gently embraces the frail old man. "Thank you," the judge says, barely loud enough for Walter to hear over the pounding of his own heart. "Thank you for everything you did for me all those years ago." His voice cracks. Walter returns the embrace, his work-worn hands patting the back of the judge's robe. "I'm so proud of you, son." He chokes out, emotion spilling from every word. When they part, both men quickly wipe their eyes, and a few soft chuckles break the tension. Even the bailiff is clearing his throat and looking at the ceiling to blink away tears discreetly. In the benches, the well-dressed accuser stands awkwardly, regret plain on his face. He steps forward hesitantly. "Your Honor, the man begins, but Judge Lawrence holds up a hand. "Sir," the judge says to him evenly, "I believe you owe Mr. Hayes an apology." The man nods vigorously and turns to Walter, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry," he mutters, remorseful voice heavy with remorse. "I was wrong. I should have never assumed. I hope you can forgive me." Walter, ever gracious, simply nods. "I forgive you," he says quietly. Because that's who Walter is. Even after all the pain, his heart holds no malice. Judge Lawrence then addresses the court staff. "Please make sure Mr. Hayes has transportation home." He turns back to Walter, a new thought forming in his eyes. "And Mr. Hayes, Walter, if you'll permit me, I'd like to personally ensure that your wife gets the medicine she needs and that you both are taken care of from here on." Walter's eyes widen. He tries to protest modestly. "Oh no, that's too much, I couldn't possibly." But the judge raises a hand kindly. "I insist," Judge Lawrence says softly. "You helped me when I had nothing. Let me return the kindness. It would be an honor. I can have the pharmacy deliver the medicine today, and I'll cover any other expenses." There is no pity in his offer, only sincere gratefulness. Overwhelmed, Walter's chin trembles. "Thank you," he whispers. "Thank you, son." In that word son lies years of affection that had been left unspoken. Moments later, the formalities are over. The judge has the paperwork signed to release Walter immediately. The courtroom is nearly empty now, the hearing long concluded. But for the few who remain, hearts are full. Walter collects his few belongings, sliding that precious photo safely back into his wallet, his name cleared and dignity restored. As he prepares to leave, Judge Lawrence walks by his side, a steady hand hovering protectively at the old cobbler's elbow. The accuser quietly slips out, lessons learned, and the prosecutor gathers her files with misty eyes, clearly moved by what she witnessed. At the doorway of the courtroom, Walter pauses and turns to the judge one last time. Under the morning light streaming in from the windows, Judge Lawrence no longer looks like the forbidding figure from earlier. He looks human, compassionate. The boy within shining through the man. "I never imagined I'd meet you again, least of all like this," Walter says with a gentle laugh, still incredulous at the morning's events. The judge smiles warmly. "Life has a funny way of bringing people back together, especially when there's a lesson to be learned," he answers. Walter tilts his head. "And what lesson is that, Your Honor?" Judge Lawrence's eyes soften. "That kindness may be forgotten by those who receive it," he says, "but it is never really lost. It lives on, silently, until one day it finds its way back to you, often when you need it most." Hearing this, Walter nods, emotion catching in his throat. The judge extends his hand, and Walter clasps it firmly. It's not a judge and defendant who shake hands now, but two grateful men who share a bond beyond the span of years. Together they step out into the hallway where a new day awaits, forever changed by the extraordinary turn of events. Their footsteps echo side by side, one steady and strong, the other a bit slow, but no longer weary with burden. Fate has been strangely, beautifully kind. Days later, true to his word, Judge Lawrence has the pharmacy deliver all of Margaret's needed medicines, and he arranges for regular groceries to be sent to the Hayes' doorstep. He visits Walter's shop, offering to help spruce it up and secretly spreading word around town of the master cobbler's skills, so business begins to pick up again. Walter can hardly believe how fortunes have turned. Every time he tries to thank Robert, for he insists on calling the judge by his first name now, the younger man just shakes his head and says he's merely repaying a debt from long ago. In truth, both men know it's more than a debt. It's a bond of humanity. Walter's act of kindness decades ago unknowingly shaped the life of the man who could have ruined his. And Robert's intervention not only saved Walter from injustice, but gave him the dignity and security he thought he'd lost forever. One afternoon, in the cozy shoe shop filled with the rich scent of leather, Robert sits on a stool as Walter fits new laces into the judge's old dress shoes, insisting they needed tending. They talk and chuckles, laugh about old times, about the candy Walter used to slip young Robbie, about how Robbie's mother cried with gratitude when Walter refused her money and fixed the boy's shoes for free. Each story shared is a brick repairing the broken bridge of years between them. Over tea, Robert confesses softly, "You know, I became a lawyer, then a judge, because I always wanted to help people, the way people once helped me. I didn't realize until today how directly that road led me back to you." His voice is thick with meaning. Walter places a hand on Robert's. Kindly, "You've done well, Robbie," he says. "Your father would have been proud. I know I am." And for a moment, Robert sees in Walter the gentle guidance of a father figure he lacked in youth. That evening after Robert departs, Walter closes up shop and returns home to Margaret with a light heart. He sits by his sleeping wife and holds her hand, reflecting on the incredible turns of life. A man who once fixed shoes for a boy now had that same boy grown and influential, fixing the broken pieces of his own life. The universe indeed works in mysterious, poetic ways. Have you ever experienced a moment when a kindness you gave or received long ago came back when you least expected it? Some might call it fate or karma. Others simply call it the circle of life. As the sun sets outside, Walter takes out the old photograph once more. Now he places another photo beside it, one the court clerk kindly took of him and Judge Robert Lawrence outside the courthouse earlier that week, the day their lives reconnected. In this new picture, Walter's smile is as wide as in the old one, and Robert stands beside him not as a child, but as a grateful friend. Two bookends of a story that spans decades, captured in images. Walter slides both photos into his wallet, close to his heart. He knows he will cherish them for the rest of his days. In the quiet of their home, Margaret stirs and asks softly if everything is all right. Walter squeezes her hand and replies, with tears of joy in his eyes, "Yes, my love, everything is more than all right now." That day, a judge learned the truth about a kindly old cobbler, and an old man learned he was never really forgotten. Both learned that sometimes justice is served not only by the law, but by the goodness we put out into the world coming back to us. And as Walter eventually drifts to sleep in the peace of that night, he does so knowing that no good deed is ever truly lost. It lives on, in the hearts it touches and the lives it changes, echoing forward through time.